Welcome back, Senior Devs. Sean Cannon here. In this lesson, we're going to talk about experience. Experience is probably the most valuable trait you can grow, which is why I wanted to start the course off with a bang. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's make sure we're on the same page when I use the word experience. In my mind, experience is simply the collection of previous experiences that can be recalled to make better decisions moving forward that yield more positive outcomes and fewer negative outcomes. In other words, remember what works and what doesn't, so next time you save time. Notice here, experience doesn't really imply how skilled you are as a developer or how long you've been a developer. Have you worked with anybody who repeatedly made the same mistakes over and over? This is what we're trying to avoid. The good news here is that you don't need to personally suffer through these situations yourself to learn from the outcomes. You can absolutely learn from someone else's experience and gain it as your own. The trick is to understand why something worked or didn't work, not just that it did or didn't work. We will cover this concept deeper in later modules, as it is really one of the golden tickets to becoming a top-tier developer. How often you put yourself in a particular situation determines how deep the experience will be. All the little subtleties and nuances from the situation that first-time participants may not notice, you will have them in the back of your mind as the product team is describing the feature they want you to build. The deeper your experience, the more comfortable you are in the situation because you're able to recall memories from so many variables and you will feel more prepared for all those possibilities. For example, I ride a motorcycle. Being able to recognize gaps in traffic and anticipate when someone wouldn't want to cut over into my lane can really only be learned from experiencing a distracted driver almost killing me by cutting me off a few years ago. I went down hard and totaled my bike and really messed up my wrists to the point where it hurt to even write code for several months. Now when I ride, I can see that same situation coming from a mile away. I can literally feel the dangers of merging on-ramps and just assume that when someone hard brakes, that other drivers will likely cut over without doing a shoulder check, and it's up to me to stay out of their blind spot. In contrast to being paranoid, experience can also build confidence. Using my motorcycle analogy, no amount of studying could help me feel comfortable taking hard corners in the rain the first few times until I experienced it more and more and felt how my bike responded to the road. Which surfaces are likely to be slippery and which aren't. Then I was able to speed up a little more and learn when I wasn't really at risk of sliding off the road. Experienced programmers are exactly the same. We know to put the emphasis on critical knowledge we've obtained from previous situations. In software development, the most valuable experiences are going to be associated with some form of emotion. Either some great accomplishment after a lot of struggle or some great failure after a lot of struggle. The more struggle, the deeper the experience imprint. You'll likely remember both those situations and can recall them the next time your product team requests a feature that will require you to relive one of those experiences. Companies typically pay more for senior engineers because the experience we carry with us can save time, reduce or even eliminate the research and development phase, and ensure any junior devs on the project get appropriate direction so the project can stay on course from day one. This results in the company often paying less for the project even though they paid us more. Learning what doesn't work is often more valuable than learning what does. What truly makes a senior developer valuable to a project is being able to lean on those experiences and pitfalls from previous projects and offer genuine consulting. If a client asks us, which email provider do you recommend? We can't simply say MailChimp if the only email provider we've ever used is MailChimp, even if it worked. We can do this with utility patterns, but not for vendor or tool recommendations. It's just not an ethical thing to do, in my opinion. This doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go out of your way and try every single email vendor, but it does mean that one of the following should be true. You've used alternatives X, Y, and Z before and can offer a genuine recommendation. You did some comprehensive analysis, research, and maybe can't offer a technical opinion of them, but can offer objective pricing and compatibility comparisons. You have colleagues in your network whom you trust and can relay their opinions of the alternatives. Keep in mind on this last bullet to make sure not to consume their opinion as your own. Be honest and upfront. Say something like, I have had success with MailChimp, and I have a trusted colleague who's integrated SendGrid, and I can recommend for or against it because of blank. You don't have to have a hands-on experience to be a good consultant, but you do have to have a reputable and trustworthy source to fill in the gaps. I do recommend getting hands-on experience with as many tools as you can, simply so that you get really comfortable working with tools that are new to you and expedite your familiarity. The tools themselves don't really matter, but the time and place does. I highly recommend using your own projects to try new things. Don't use your client's projects as an excuse to recommend and learn new library or tool that you've been wanting to learn on the side. If it happens, great, but it needs to be the client's choice. One of the things that makes me really valuable in our field is that I've been consistently coding for over 20 years. I've had to part ways with a lot of technology that I used to use every day simply because it's no longer a thing, but I'm able to keep those experiences with me and lean on them when the new technology is all the same. Nobody really uses FTP anymore or Flash or SOAP APIs, but having experienced a lot of pain points and wins with those tools, I immediately recognize when new tools try to go down the wrong path. One trick with experience is that you don't actually have to live the experience yourself to use it. You can use someone else's pain and learn from their experience. I've actually learned a handful of really great tips from candidates when I interview them. I'll ask them for their most memorable pain point with a tool that made them hate the tool, and their most memorable win where they figured out the problem after a lot of struggle. If I can recall their experience when it's needed for my project, then it's valuable all the same. So with that, I want to share a story with you of a time I failed really hard and learned one of the most valuable lessons in my career so you can get an idea of gaining experience from someone else's mistake. Very early in my career, when I was just out of college and a novice with PHP and MySQL, I opted to make an e-commerce website project all by myself. I had a designer friend handle the UI, but I was so confident I could build the backend alone, even though I'd never really done it before. This client was a parent of one of my friends, and so I offered to do this site for next to nothing, and she let me build it however I wanted. 2 months later, we delivered and it worked great, or so I thought. The client called me freaking out that the website was charging other people's credit cards. When someone would place an order, the previous customer was getting the bill. I had no idea what had happened. They abandoned the whole project and had me roll back to their old site. I gave them a refund and studied my ass off with my tail between my legs. Well, it turns out that being a database noob at the time, I had omitted a foreign key in the orders table, so it didn't point to the customers table at all. If you're new to database design, a foreign key just means there's essentially a column in one table that references a row in another table. The checkout process collected billing and shipping information, saved it, and then showed a big confirm button. So as long as the people went through that flow and clicked that button, it all worked fine, until one person decided to change their mind and abandon their cart. The database then had, say, 50 customers and 49 orders. For a few days after that, everybody's order charged the previous customer's credit card. It was a terribly designed system. All I needed to have done was add a customer ID column to the orders table instead of assuming order 20 belonged to customer 20. So as embarrassing as that mistake was, this is a happy story because for over 20 years now, I've been completely OCD with all of my code, and I'm always the first to admit when I don't understand a tool in the stack. Had I not made that mistake, I'd hate to think how far I would have gotten before really screwing up on a big team with a big company or something. I carry that experience with me always. It's so easy to misinterpret comfort with competence, and I will never do it again. So even if you don't fully understand the details of the experience I just shared, my goal here is that the experience you gain from this is that even the smallest oversight can have a disastrous effect on the project and your career. Just because something seems to be working doesn't mean that it is production ready. Never trust your code, always test your code, and remember that those who fail to learn from the mistakes of their predecessors are destined to repeat them. That wraps up this module. Keep growing, and I'll see you in the next one.